Most people looking at hyperbaric get lost in pressure, ATA numbers, oxygen flow, what it's made out of, and other hype. I'm here to cut through all of that and answer one question. Should you be looking at a soft shell chamber, a hard shell chamber, or try it out at a clinic first? I'm going to start broad and show you how this stuff actually works. Then I'll narrow it down on how I think about it and how we've seen it in practice with hundreds of other people and clinics. So how does this actually work? Regardless of the shell, hyperbaric works by using pressure to dissolve more oxygen into your blood plasma. Soft shells sit at a low end of that spectrum, and hard shells sit at a high end of that spectrum. This is a diagram just to explain. So we are at 1 ATA right now, which is 1 absolute atmosphere. That is sea level. At sea level, your body absorbs 21% O2. Okay, that's what we're breathing in. And as you can see here, we've got these little oxygen bubbles, which is the most that our body can absorb at this amount of pressure. What happens is if we add 1.5 ATA, which is 5 meters below sea level, with 100% oxygen, you see a lot more oxygen in your blood plasma. And then at 2 ATA, which is 10 meters below sea level, at 100% oxygen, you can see significantly more oxygen dissolved into your blood plasma. This is the result of combining pressure, which is ATA, with 100% oxygen, which is what you're breathing in during hyperbaric therapy. Now, between these pressures, there's a difference in how much oxygen is being dissolved into your blood plasma per session. So per session is typically 60 to 90 minutes, and during that time, depending what pressure you're at, will dictate how much oxygen is actually dissolved into your body. And what might interest you is this is actually 2 separate treatments. You have pressure as a treatment and oxygen as a treatment. And combined, that's what makes hyperbaric oxygen therapy. In this instance, what pressure does to the body is it gently squeezes the cardiovascular system and stimulates blood flow. Okay, so it's like having a gentle massage on your cardiovascular system. When you're under pressure, it's getting squeezed and then it reacts. It squeezes and then reacts. That's what your blood vessels are doing under pressure in real time. And then when you combine this with oxygen, that oxygen is what goes into your blood plasma as it's being squeezed and then goes to places like your heart, lungs, organs, damaged tissue, and helping systematically reducing inflammation and helping your cells, your mitochondria, replicate effectively. If you have more healthy cells that are replicating, they'll get rid of the dead cells or underperforming cells that aren't replicating properly. Now, a key highlight here is you don't need to be at 2.0 to 2.4 ATA to get all of these benefits. And I'm going to run through what these benefits are and how it actually works. So to start, you might have seen these soft shell chambers. Soft shell chambers typically go from 1.3 to 1.5 ATA. This is the engineering behind it. They're basically limited to their canvas style design. Now, these chambers typically great for general wellness, recovery, longevity, traumatic brain injury, and I'll dive deep into each of these examples with published studies that we have at HyperbaricHQ.com. Secondly, you might have seen these capsule style chambers. Now, these chambers can go to higher pressure because they're made of steel, carbon fiber. They can typically hold significantly more pressure at a longer period of time because of the design. What this fundamentally means is per session, you're getting more oxygen dissolved into your blood plasma. So there is a spectrum in terms of these chambers. You might have seen these lay down ones, these sit up ones, variations of the sit up ones as well. They all effectively do the same thing. They go to high pressure. But there are a couple of other variations within these that you should be aware about, which we covered on another video, which was the built-in breathing system or the continuous flow oxygen system. These chambers typically use a continuous flow system, and these chambers use a built-in breathing system. You can check out our other video, which we'll link here, where we dive deep on what the difference is and what the outcome is you can expect. So more pressure per session means more oxygen in the system, but that doesn't automatically mean more is better for you. So now we have a broad understanding of the difference in pressure and how much oxygen is dissolved in your body per ATA that you're at. Let's dive into a little bit deeper what soft shells are actually good for. General wellness, longevity, light concussion, brain fog work, recovery for active people or inactive. They're a great entry point for just starting out with hyperbaric therapy because the pressure on your body isn't too intense. Got to remember you're jumping into a foreign environment. More than likely, you haven't gone through any significant diving. So this would be your first time going into a high pressure environment. Now, being your first time, you'll generally find a bit of change in your ears, which is the air bubble expanding as you go under pressure. Now, this is a great entry point for, as I said, wellness, longevity, sports recovery, small clinics, home optimizers. Now, there's discussion online on whether these chambers are actually effective. Speaking from experience and hundreds of other studies and anecdotes, they have their place. There is no, this is the only right way to do hyperbaric oxygen therapy. There's only what works for you, what we've seen in actual practice, as well as peer-reviewed studies that have actively measured their effectiveness and their outcomes. Some of the limits on these chambers is you're not running high pressure longevity protocols. You're running protocols at 1.3 to 1.5 ATA, and really you need to get more sessions to get in the range of total oxygen load compared to a 2 ATA chamber, but ultimately you'll never get the same amount of oxygen penetration as a 2 ATA chamber. Fundamentally, there's just not enough pressure to dissolve this much oxygen into your blood plasma per session. Okay, now let's look at what hard shells are actually good for. Hard shell chambers, 2 ATA and above, is where the majority of peer-reviewed studies have come from in terms of autoimmune conditions, aging protocols, longevity protocols, anything from post-surgical work, fibromyalgia, and cardiovascular and diabetic conditions. This is where the majority of research is, which is why the majority of people lean towards hard shells. However, that's not to say, again, that soft shells don't have their place. There is more and more research still being published today on the effectiveness of soft shells. So some of the pros, look, you've got the longevity and telomere lengthening protocols, Shai Elfrati out of Israel, chronic oncology adjacent treatment protocols, and high performance recovery. The limits on this, so obviously it's higher capital expenditure, and you do need a little bit more training, safety, and ops understanding to really run these chambers personally or in a business safely, effectively, and ultimately getting the outcomes that you want. And this ultimately dials back into loading phases, intensive phases, and deloading phases. And we'll cover this in another video. So where does a soft shell actually make sense? If you're generally a healthy person, you want better recovery, you're really kind of getting those little tweaks. You might be doing infrared sauna, red light therapy, have a range of other kind of health and wellness integrative protocols in your life already. A soft shell would make a wonderful complement. Primarily, you'll find that you'll recover faster, you'll sleep deeper, and you'll get some cognitive improvements as well. And when I say cognitive improvements, you might realize you start to get better active recall, improve short-term memory, and even some long-term memories that come back because you've got more oxygen in your brain. What it's doing is it's gently squeezing your brain's capillaries, and you get instances of neurogenesis, which is the growth of new neural pathways through blood vessels being built in your brain, as well as better active recovery, better sleep, and overall, think of it like a little bit of a boost in your overall daily life. Now, I want to run through some examples from our research library on what low pressure up to 1.5 hyperbaric actually does. This study out of the United States had mild traumatic brain injury and emotional distress in firefighters. This is a bit of a landmark study because they only did low pressure 1.3 ATA, 45 minutes over 20 sessions. This increased cerebral blood flow, more blood flow to the brain, pressure, and with the help of oxygen dissolving into your blood plasma, had healthy mitochondria to give it the energy to start to repair these neural pathways. This was at 1.3 ATA, right? Another example, boosts brain function and quality of life for mild traumatic brain injury patients years after injury. This study had patients going under 40 hyperbaric sessions with 100% oxygen at 1.5 ATA. They did this 60 minutes for 5 days a week. What we saw was substantial improvements in cognitive function and quality of, and this was actually measured in SPECT imaging. Brain activity revealed increased brain activation that corresponded to cognitive improvements that were actually recorded. Another example reverses age-related memory decline and brain oxidation. Again, you're getting more oxygen to your brain. Pressure is gently massaging that cardiovascular system and it's gently opening up those neural pathways, getting more blood flow into it. What we saw, cognitive improvements, reverse DGAL-induced impairments in learning and memory, reduction in oxidative stress, increased levels of antioxidant enzymes, and reduced stress markers in the brain, reduced inflammation, and a host of other improvements. Now, this was all measured at 1.5 ATA. Now, we have a range of these studies from aging to regeneration, but particularly, I want to bring your attention to neurocognitive benefits, mild traumatic brain injury, and reducing oxidization in the brain, like amalgamoid plaques. So let's look at hard shells and where does a hard shell make sense. If you're following some of the longevity research out of Israel and you want to match those protocols, which is 2 ATA for 60 sessions, a hard shell chamber is for you. If you've got a serious condition, whether it's neuro, oncology, chronic, where higher pressure has actually been proven and has studies that have evaluated its effectiveness, then hard shell is for you. Finally, you really want to make sure that you've got the space and the commitment to actually use the unit, right? These things take up a little bit of space. Think of a small room, a queen size bed, even a king size bed and bigger. You really want to make sure that you're set up properly to integrate the therapy and you'll be using it often. Finally, a hard shell would make sense in a commercial environment as you're getting a high frequency of users, which in a soft shell chamber, just zipping it up, zipping it down all the time, can get a bit cumbersome, and those zips end up wearing out a little bit quicker. Just something to keep in mind if you're looking at it from a commercial perspective. Now, lane 3, this is where I wouldn't recommend any chamber at all, is if you haven't done hyperbaric and this is your first time learning about it, you've maybe heard it on a podcast, read it in a book somewhere, go and find a clinic. You can even use the clinic finder and find providers just in Australia for now to go find a clinic near you that offers hyperbaric therapy so you can go try it yourself. In this instance, I recommend starting between 10 and 20 sessions, do an actual protocol and really evaluate how your body feels. From that point, you can really start to make an educated decision on whether having a unit at home makes sense for you. Now, to cap this off, some quick fire questions that we get every week. Can I start with a soft shell and upgrade later? Of course you can. A lot of people start and get their feet wet with a soft shell chamber. They see the benefits, they start getting the benefits. And if they really deem that the higher pressure is necessary, more often than not, they end up getting a hard shell chamber and then either have the soft shell chamber on hand for people just getting their feet wet, or they just move that on. Is 1.3 ATA even worth it? Absolutely. For general wellness, if you're just getting started with hyperbaric and you'd love to do a hard shell high pressure chamber, but it's just not feasible or accessible, we've just gone through the research that shows there is evaluated improvements both in the brain and the body from soft shell chambers, specifically at 1.3 to 1.5 ATA. As we went through earlier, you will get significantly more oxygen dissolved in your blood plasma at 1.5 versus 1.3, but again, just depends on where you are in your journey and what makes most sense for you. How many sessions do people actually need? So ultimately comes down to what you're using it for and what kind of outcome you're looking for. Wellness and recovery, generally between 10 to 20 sessions. You want to bunch these really, really close together. You'll get a significant improvement across your inflammatory biomarkers, your sleep, and overall cognitive function. Again, this is the low end of the spectrum. All the longevity studies coming out of Israel and all these long-term benefit studies are generally at 40 to 60 sessions. For serious conditions, oncology, chronic disease, most of the time it's between 40 and 60 sessions, as well as ongoing top-ups to really make sure your cells have enough energy to replicate correctly to get rid of those cells that aren't replicating correctly. Is it safe? Will it explode? With these particular chambers, the engineering behind it, no. These chambers don't pressurize with oxygen, they actually pressurize with ambient air, and you breathe 100% oxygen through a mask. That mask pumps oxygen into the chamber, which you breathe, and then when you exhale carbon dioxide either out of the chamber or into the chamber, depending on what oxygen system you're using. If you'd like to learn more about what kind of pressure makes sense for what you're looking for, come to the research page at HyperbaricHQ, and I'm sure you'll find a study relevant to your use case. Catch you on the next one.